Me too. The last time I had taken this many antihistamines before I spoke was in Winchester, Tennessee a few years ago. And I mean, I was in a fog like you wouldn't believe. And their pulpit area, I think, as I recall, was about 6 feet off the ground. And it came out like this one, but it was very narrow. And I was making an illustration about what happens when you walk away from God. I said, you know what happens when you walk away from, boom, there I went. 6 feet I fell. Bruised my hip. I had to tell Alice, I got that preaching. I really, really did. Nobody in the room got up to help me. They're all going like, that's a great illustration. Really works. Now, why they would build a pulpit like that, I have no idea. And maybe not quite as high as I remember. Of course, I was in a fog. And I am today, so I'll have to listen to the tape later and see if I said anything that I disagree with. Not long ago, I read a book by Andy Stanley, maybe, I don't know, over a year ago now. And in that book, Stanley, I don't know if you know who Andy is. He's with this church down in the north part of Atlanta. And he talks about how that he thinks that the kingdom of God was done a disservice when we started building church buildings. Now, the reason he said that, and this is not a sermon about church buildings, I just want to make a point from what Andy had to say. He said because of that, we began to move our idea of thinking of church as a group of people to thinking about church as being a specific particular place. Now, interestingly, near where we live, there's an intersection that has thousands of cars go through that intersection every day. It's 2 lanes each way, but in the morning drive time, the cars are all going north. In the afternoon or evening drive time, all the cars are going south, and literally thousands of cars go by. On the northwest corner of that intersection is a service station. Right across on the northeast corner is a huge Baptist church. As a matter of fact, the senior pastor is a good friend of mine. As a matter of fact, several of the pastors on that staff are friends of mine. They're just really good people and a really good church. The other 2 corners are at this point empty. They're just vacant lots. And not too terribly long ago, a sign went up on one of those empty lots that another Southern Baptist church from up in Brentwood was going to build a satellite campus right across that 2-lane road from the other Southern Baptist church. Didn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, you would literally just walk around across a 2-lane road and be in another Southern Baptist church. I asked my friend, the senior pastor, what he thought about that. He was extremely gracious. He typically is extremely gracious. And not too long after that, I ran into somebody from the other Baptist church who was going to build that building, and I said, why there? I mean, literally, what are you going to do to that church if you build a church right next to it? And in addition to that, what does it say to the community? We have the north side Southern Baptist Church and the south side Southern Baptist Church. It's going to look like you guys are enemies. I remember that from when I was a young minister. I was preaching in LaGrange, Georgia, and our building, which had Church of Christ on it, was just right down the block from one that said Church of God on it. I was out in my front yard one day when a guy was walking down the sidewalk. Literally, this actually happened. He stopped and said, when did the old man and the boy have the falling out? And I thought, that's got to be the way the world sees it, that we're all divided. And we put all these different names, and I don't know about what's happening all on this side of Nashville, but down where we live, it seems that every school has a different church with a sign out front that they're meeting there on Sunday. And now warehouses are showing up with the same, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so Stanley's point was, when we begin to localize and say this is a group meeting in this particular place, that our activities started gravitating to what happened inside that building rather than what happened outside that building with people who need to be ministered to. That rather than this active group of people, the ecclesia, the called out, the church being people who are just going through the world and touching people for Jesus, that it became more focused on we need to be there at certain times and we'll all worship together, and that religion kind of got contained and decided into the inside of buildings. Now, I don't know exactly how far to go with that, but in general principles, I think Andy's right. Now, I've only met him once. We had lunch together a few years ago, so I don't really have the right to call him Andy, but it makes me sound important. I think Andy is right. Let me read a passage to you, because, you see, I don't know of any passage in the Bible, and you can think about it. Go through your New Testament this afternoon if you wish. Look for any passage in the Bible that says, come Judgment Day, God is going to look at any minister, any elder, any deacon, any Bible class teacher, any church member at all, and say, how big was your building? I'm going to make a judgment based on what kind of a building you had. There is no such verse. But you find verses like this where Jesus is teaching about what's going to happen come Judgment Day. He says, when the Son of Man, of course he's referring to himself, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, that's what we typically refer to as the second coming. When he comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we go see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, I tell you the truth. And we pointed this out before. Whenever you see Jesus making a statement like that, I tell you the truth, he's not saying I was not telling you the truth before. That's not what that means. When he says I tell you the truth, what he's saying is underline this, put an exclamation mark behind it. What I'm telling you now is extremely important. He says, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They will also answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you? He'll reply, I tell you the truth. In other words, you underline this. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Now that's a pretty heavy-duty scripture, don't you think? When he talks about the judgment day, and a lot of things that we might be expecting him to ask there, he didn't. I don't know that there's actually going to be a whole lot of questions come judgment day. Basically, it would come down under these two categories. Did you love me, and did you love your fellow man? Those are the two greatest commandments. On those two hang all the law and the prophets, Jesus said. And this was just a continuation of that, did you love your fellow man? Because you can say you love people. It can be one of those three-word phrases, I love you. You can say that you love people, but we know that love is not just an expression of words, that love is an expression of doing for other people what it is that they need. And so if we genuinely are going to love our fellow man as we love ourselves, the second greatest commandment, Jesus said, and then it's going to show up in what he just showed there, that we're going to be finding people who are hungry and we are going to feed them. We're going to be finding people who are thirsty and we're going to give them drink. We're going to give them whatever it is they need. And the more we give that is sacrificial on our part, the greater the blessing, because now it's not just me saying, oh, I don't really need this anyway, here, you can have it. It's giving people something that has some importance to you. I mentioned earlier in an earlier sermon that I was in Haiti back in February, and they had given us a list of things to bring, that we were going to go up to a village, and we were going to give people things in that village. And so we took an extra big old case. This case has been with me all over the world, Thailand, Korea. It's a pretty big case. Got my name across the front of it. really fancy. It's a big piece of tape that says Beam on it. I got on there, and I took it to Haiti and had it packed. Actually, Alice went and got all the stuff to pack it with, you understand. But we had the list, and I took it down there, and then we went to this village. And we couldn't drive all the way up to it. There was just no way, so we had to get out and walk in that very, very hot sun up the side of a mountain where it has not rained, at least in February, had not rained since last May. And we were taking our cases up. I didn't have to take mine. The people from the village came down and met us and took one look at me and carried my case for me. Actually, I thought they were going to carry me for a minute. Like, oh no, look at this fat guy. He's going to die right here. We'll carry him up the hill. We got up there and we gave them the things, and they decided we just gave them the cases so they could distribute. And we were about to leave, and lots of good things happened there I won't explain. And we were about to leave the village finally, and I turned to the guys and said, I need to get that case. It's been with me all over the world. And they said, well, they need it. But it's got my name on it. It's my case. But they need it. Enjoy. You say, wow, what a great sacrifice. Not much. I think I bought the thing in Thailand for $5. It's not much of a sacrifice, but every little thing we do for other people. Interestingly, they were doing more for us than we were doing for them. They understood more about giving than we did. Oh, and just to get a cup of water, they had to walk down the mountain and back up, and it took them 3 hours round trip to bring water to the village. The world is like that. But it's not just like that in Haiti and in Honduras, where our people go, and from our church here, and other places people go to from our church, in Bulgaria, whatever. It's not just like that. There's poverty. There's poverty all over the world. There's even poverty in America. Now, it's all relative, I should say, because poverty in America is nothing like poverty in Haiti. You would understand a great deal of difference in those two things. I mean, to have the level of poverty income in America would make you rich in a country like Haiti. But what he's saying here is there are people with needs. And I want you to take care of those needs. Now, a couple of more passages to make the point here. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 12. Now, there's a dearth going on down in the Jerusalem area. There's a lot of things going on there, and the believers in Jerusalem don't have enough. And so Paul has been working through Macedonia and Corinth, and he's been telling them, okay, now we want to take a contribution down there to help those people who are in need. So in verse 12 in 2 Corinthians 8, he says, for if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what he does not have. Here's what he's trying to say in that particular case. He's saying, now, don't think that you measure your giving against the giving of somebody else. These people have a need, and some people have more resources from which to give, and some people don't have as many resources from which to give. And what you're going to do is you're going to reach into whatever you have. And so God's not going to be asking you to give what you don't have. He's just looking into your heart, your situation. So don't compare yourselves to other people who are either richer or poorer than you. So in the next verse he says, our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard-pressed, but that there might be equality. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn, their plenty will supply what you need. Then there will be equality. As it is written, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. What's he saying? Now, he had just earlier in that chapter reminded the people in Corinth that the people of Macedonia had been giving amazingly, even beyond what he thought that they would or could give, because they heard about the problems that were going on in Jerusalem, and so they wanted to make sure that they could take care of those people down there, and they were taking up contributions beyond what anybody expected, because they really wanted to help the people down there. And so as Paul tells the Corinthians about the generosity of the Macedonians, he then gets into this phrase where he says, now look, I'm not asking you to put yourselves into a bind to do this. You give what you can out of what you have. And we all know the story about the widow's mite, where people were putting money for the temple, and one lady comes along with just a little bit of money, like one of our pennies, and she drops the penny in. And Jesus said, to the amazement of his disciples, that she gave more than all of them. And they're thinking, wow, Jesus missed math class. Because so many people are giving a lot more money than she gave. And he said, but that's all she had. It was last September in one of our workshops for Marriages in Crisis. This couple, marriage in crisis, they needed to be saved. I'm not going to tell you all their story except to say that he had made a poor financial decision that he thought was really a good one, and he put all of their money into it and lost all their money. He said, we still would have made it, except my brother had also invested in this and sued me, my brother in the flesh. And because of that lawsuit now, we are in major financial problems. We had scholarshiped the workshop for them because we knew they couldn't afford to pay the fee. Beyond that, people that knew them had collected some money so they'd have enough money to buy gasoline to drive from where they lived to Nashville and to stay in a very, very inexpensive hotel and eat very, very inexpensive food when they were here. On the last day of the workshop, he walked up to us and he said, I've calculated exactly how much money it will take to get back home, and I've got almost $50 left. Well, congratulations, you actually came out ahead. He said, no, we want you to take this $50 and help some other couple that needs to come to your workshop. But man, that's the last money you have. We have enough gas to get home. We even figured, if you go to the drive-thru and get the dollar menu, we can eat. We've got it all figured out. So please, here I was trying to refuse it, and he didn't use these words, but basically what he said was, please give us the gift of being able to give. And so we took his money and used it for other people. There are people who have been doing that here. I don't know, where $2,400 came from for that dinner, but I imagine some people were contributing graciously and generously. And not long ago when they had the auction and I heard the numbers about what we're going to do with that, some people have been giving graciously and generously, and all that is good. That is extremely good. As a matter of fact, in chapter 9, the Apostle Paul went on to say this. Beginning of verse 6, he said, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Now, that might not make as much sense to people who are not farmers. I mean, most of us grew up in the city, I'm guessing. But he's saying if you plant more, you get more crop. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking to get more crop. So don't sow sparingly, sow generously so that you can have a greater crop come up. My friend Jack Exum, who is long since now, a few years ago at least, has gone to be with Jesus, used to go around and talk to churches about this. And some people had actually given him some scoops over the years, these big metal scoops like we have in our ice machine back here. And he would pull out a little bitty scoop when he first started, just a very small one. It couldn't be more than 3 or 4 tablespoons. And he said, so if you sow with this, that's the same kind of scoop God blesses you back with. And then he'd pull out a bigger one, and then he kept talking, and finally he pulled out one that looked like he might have to have some kind of machinery to pick up. This thing was so huge. And he said, so what are you going to sow with God? The next verse here says, each man, by the way, this does not exclude the women. He's talking about people. Each person should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. He's saying don't ever give out of guilt. Don't ever give just because you're trying to live up to what somebody else is doing. Don't ever give out of some negative reason. If you give because you love God. Give because you really want to help people. Be happy with what you give. God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. As it is written, he has scattered abroad his gifts to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. Now, he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. I'm going to stop there for a minute. You say, what's this all about then? You say, are you trying to tell us to give more money to this church? That's up to you. You give whatever you think is right. Hopefully you will be generous. I mean, David's already mentioned that we have a budget. But I'm not talking about something beyond that. I mean, don't cut that. Don't in any way cut that. I'm not talking about something beyond that. My younger brother, Greg, is one of the wisest men I've ever met. I think I've told you before, at least I've told some people in this church, that Greg is such a prayer warrior. Literally, my younger brother, Greg, is such a prayer warrior that sometimes when I pray, I go, Lord, it's Joe. You know, Greg's brother? Because I figure he knows Greg. Many years ago, when I was in a bad situation, I wound up back over there living in Beach Island, South Carolina. Lived with my parents for a little while. My mother's actually here today. By the way, don't get excited about Beach Island. It's Beech. Nowhere close to the ocean. Here I was working for my brother's paving company, and I would ride along, and sometimes he'd ask me questions about Scripture, you know, because I had a degree in Bible. He thought maybe I knew something, at least at the outset. He thought I knew something. And one day he was referring to this verse in James where it says, pure and undefiled religion before God is this. Anybody remember that verse? To take care of the widows and the orphans. He said, so why are we doing that? Well, I started to answer that when I realized, wait a minute, this is not some hypothetical question with him. He's not asking for some theological answer. He's asking for a very practical answer. So sometimes we would ride together in the business, the paving business. I went to work for him. By the way, I'm a lousy paver. But I would ride along with my brother. And say one of our workers had gotten hurt somehow. Now, he'd be drawing workers' comp, you understand. But my brother would know that workers' comp probably wasn't enough, and I don't know how many times we'd be riding along, and instead of heading to some job site, we'd wind up in some little subdivision, because these were basically blue-collar workers. These weren't big, fancy brick houses, you understand. This was one of the older subdivisions, and we'd stop in front of some house, and he'd say, I'd be right back. And I'd sit there, and I'd watch him go to the door and knock on the door, and then either the worker or the worker's spouse, and they were all male workers, so the wife, would open the door. Greg would ask a few questions. He wouldn't stay long. He's not a man that talks very much. And then he always had his hand in his pocket, and then he would reach out to shake their hands goodbye. And I could see he had green in those hands. Now, I have no idea how much money my brother gave away, except on one occasion when I actually got a chance to count it. There were 50 $20 bills. It's $1,000. Did I do my math correctly? Is that $1,000? $1,000. Now you say, wow, he must have been a very wealthy man. He was still trying to make a paving business work. Why was he doing that? Well, because when he read that verse about taking care of people, he didn't think that it applied just to widows and just to orphans. His understanding was that it applied to people who needed help. And if he had any, he'd give it away. Now, he was blessed in return. Things would come back. It would come back and he would do better and better and better. Now, if you think, well, your brother's just a spendthrift, you can ask my mother. My brother is so tight that when he lets go of a dollar bill, George Washington's face is blue. So if you want to sell him something, you better be ready to negotiate. But if you have a problem, he'll help you with it, by his prayers or by his money or whatever. On one occasion, his wife, in a dream, woke up from a dream thinking that she had just been told by God that there was a teacher in her school. She was still teaching school at the time, not retired, that needed exactly a certain amount of money. I don't remember what it was. Let's say it was $469.17. It was something like that. And so she told Greg, I'm taking him a check tomorrow for $469.17. And from a dream, yes. So she took it to school, and during the break at the teacher's lounge, she went over and slid him that check. And he opened it and looked at it and said, that is to the penny what I have to be able to pay today that I didn't have to pay. To the penny. Well, God has blessed my brother and his wife, just as God has blessed many of you who have been extremely generous. Generosity can be in money, but generosity can also be in time that you spend to other people because they need you there. It can be in some task you do for them, like cutting somebody's grass when they're unable to do, or painting their house because it desperately needs it and they don't have the way to do it. It can be changing the oil for somebody who needs their oil changed. It can be in any number of things ministering to other people. And what happens when you do that is that you bless their lives. But Jesus says, thank you for cutting my grass. Thank you for changing my oil. Thank you for putting food on the table. Thank you for paying the rent. Because that's what we read back there in that book of Matthew in chapter 25. That's exactly what Jesus is saying. You say, no, okay, what's your point? Here it is. We want to start into a summer of service. What that means is that on certain Sundays, I'm going to give a specific challenge, but not to the entire church. Now, David gave a great challenge to the whole church. Very good. I'm going to be giving a challenge on certain Sundays to specific individuals. Now, let me explain this, so listen carefully so you don't misunderstand. I'm going to base this on something that I actually did for the Fourth Avenue Church down in Franklin a few years ago. We did it on a Wednesday night. What I did was this. I said, okay, I need up to 5 people who will be willing to give a minimum of $100 above and beyond your contribution. But it's got to be that this $100 or more does not in any way negatively affect you. In other words, it can't be coming out of your rent money or money that you have to have. It's got to be money that you have as discretionary funds, if you will. And it can't come out of your contribution. You understand? Not a penny out of the contribution. I want to be able to work here next week. Not a penny out of the contribution. And I don't remember, 4 or 5 people came and stood in a row over here. We'll be willing to give up to $100. To what? I said, now I need, however many there were, let's say there were 5 of them. Now I said, I need 5 volunteers who in the next 2 weeks are going to go find somebody who has a need. Now the need might be financial, or the need might be that they need you to cut their grass, or you might need to do baby, I don't know what. But if you need the money, these are your resources. If it's something else, you could do it on your own. And so we had like 5 volunteers come up to match those 5 people over there, and they stood there. And I said, okay, in a couple of weeks, we're going to ask you, and maybe even you, if you've had anything happen, to come up. I'm going to take the microphone and I'm going to interview you and ask you what you did and how it affected someone's life. And if it really affected that person's life in some amazing way, maybe you want to bring them to church. And we'll also interview him or her. What happened when this person did this? Now, it was interesting to see what occurred after that. For example, there was one young lady that was in this group who never did anything because she spent the entire 2 weeks trying to figure out what she should do. Because everything that came up, she thought, no, there might be something better. There might be something more important. And so she never did anything because she kept looking for something more important. That didn't work. The most interesting story came out of over here. There was a guy, he happens to be a CPA. That's irrelevant to the story, except that means he knows a lot of people that he doesn't know real well. I mean, you would understand that profession, you meet a lot of people. He came back with the most interesting story. He said, I kept waiting for one of them to call me for at least $100. Nobody ever did. So I kept praying, Lord, I offered to be the resource, so I'm here. What do you want to use me for? He said, I was at home one night and got a phone call from a guy that I had met once, barely knew. He had found my home number, and he called and said, my marriage is in trouble. Can you help me? He said, I'm a CPA. I don't specialize in marriage problems. I specialize in tax returns and other accounting things. But then I thought, wait a minute, maybe this is God answering my prayer. I'm supposed to be a resource for somebody. And he said, well, tell me about your problems. And the guy said, my wife is in love with another man. As a matter of fact, she's down in Atlanta with him right now. I'm here with my children. Can you help me? So the CPA friend said, well, can you meet me tomorrow at McDonald's? I'll bring my wife so that the kids can play and she'll watch them and you and I can talk seriously. And they did. He knew about our particular workshops, and please don't think this is a commercial for our workshop. That's not. It's just the thing he knew about. And so he said, I'm going to send you to Joe's workshop, which, by the way, costs more than $100. And the guy said, I don't think my wife will go. And so he said, give me your wife's number. And this guy, a CPA, not skilled or trained in this whatsoever, called a woman he had never met and said, you don't know me, but I know your marriage is in trouble and you're in love with another man, and I feel like I'm supposed to help you. Are you feeling any guilt at all about what you're doing? She said, well, I'm feeling a little. He worked on that, and he wound up getting that couple to come to our workshop. He and his wife took care of the kids for the whole weekend by the grace of God. But kids they didn't know, by the way. And you would think, well, the kids will be terrified, especially when they realize he's a CPA. But these kids come over and spend the whole weekend with these people they never met. By the grace of God, that marriage was saved and is doing well to this day. And that was like 2005. So I don't know. No, that was just one of the stories. I remember that one because every time I have lunch with him, he tells me the story all over again. As a matter of fact, just me, but whoever's at lunch with us, he tells the story all over again. Like, it's amazing. It's so cool how God works. Now, he's done many other things for God. Don't think that's the only thing he's ever done. So why don't we try that? All right, so here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. Now, it may be that nobody wants to respond to this, and if that's the case, that's the case, because we have not planted anyone in the audience for this. What I need is for up to 5, and it could be 1, it could be 0, up to 5 people who would say, I'm willing to be a resource. Now, the resource may mean that I'll give at least $100, which does not come out of my contribution and does not put me in any bad situation at all. It's discretionary funds. Or it may be that I'm a resource in some other fashion. Now, I'm willing to give the money if that's the case, but it may be that somebody's going to be asking me for my wisdom. It may be that somebody's going to be, who knows, but I'm willing to be a resource, and in 2 weeks, willing to tell you what happened because I'm willing to be the resource. Now, up to 5 people, men, women, members, non-members. Any volunteers? All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we got 5 already. Well, all right, 6. Come on, man. You guys will just stand over here. Now, somebody write down who all it was so in 2 weeks we don't go, who was up there? Oh, well, I guess we got 7. Come on. All right. Apparently we have 8. Very good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Now I need up to 8 people who will say, I'm going to go looking. I'm going to find the person that either needs money or needs something else, but I'm going to find that person and minister to him or her or them, and in 2 weeks I'm going to report on it. I need up to 8 volunteers for that. Okay, 1, you guys just stand over here. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Am I counting correctly? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Did you hear that? 7. Oh, 8. All right. Okay. Now, what I need you to guys is to pair up over here somehow. Yep. All right, somebody's going to be with Chris here. Here you go. We need you to... Wait, Chris. Okay. You already have one? Okay, we want to make sure that somebody has Chris. Oh, you don't have one. Okay, 2 of you have Chris. All right. You say, what in the world are you doing? I don't know. We're just throwing our bread on the water, Ecclesiastes 11:1, to see what happens. We want to see if we can make this a summer of service so that throughout the summer, on certain Sundays, we're going to have people giving reports. And on certain Sundays, we're giving more challenges. And we're going to take us out of the building. Now, does somebody write down who all's up here? 2 weeks from today, 2 weeks from today. Now, what that means is I'll be here at 8 o'clock that morning. You guys have to come. If you have a report, we're going to meet out there and talk about that, and we'll talk about the report we're going to give. Fair enough? I don't know why this is scaring me so much. Okay, thank you very much. You can go to your seats. All right, 2 weeks from today, 8 a.m. 8 a.m.
We're supposed to get him on.
That's right, or whatever you
Okay.
Yeah, he's going to give it to somebody else. You're going to give it, he's going to give it to somebody else.
Right.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yes. My wife's asking me if I'm coming to church in 2 weeks. Lord willing, I will be here. What she's thinking is, I've got to be in Dallas the weekend after that. That's what she's thinking about. Okay. Unless I go to Dallas a week early, I will be here that Sunday. Okay, fair enough? All right, so everybody understand the deal? It's not a one-time shot. We're going to be doing this all summer long. We're going to make this a summer service and take our religion outside the building. So start thinking about other things so you can come up and suggest to the elders or to me, hey, what if we did this, and what about if we did that? So either talk to the shepherds or talk to me about that. You got it? Summer of service, that's what it's going to be. Let's pray. Father, you're gracious, you're amazing, you're kind, you're good. God, use us. Use us all the time, but particularly and specifically use us this summer, and particularly and specifically use these people that have just publicly proclaimed that they're going to do this. I ask through Jesus' name.
Let's stand and sing together. Praise him, you heavens and all that's above. Praise him, you angels and heavenly hosts. Let the